All right. So can everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And if I change the window, is can you see everything right? So if I go to present mode, you see
Yep.
the slides in present mode. Awesome. Okay.
Yep.
I'm just gonna switch this here. All right. Okay, so as I said, today's presentation is to briefly introduce about TODO Group. But first of all, I will first would like to give you some context about what is an OSPO, why an OSPO space, why all this started, and then I would like to move to one of the what we have we done about regarding to the initiatives, the work in progress initiatives, and what would you what we would like to achieve in the future. Then, if I have time, I will briefly introduce some of the idea of the OSPO accelerators. So the first thing, so I know this is not new for many of you, but for some of you might be. Um, in the innovation race, everything is powered right now by software. Now every company is a software company, and I will go far from that, and I will say that now that 80% of components from other applications comes from open source. I would say it's not now the innovation race, but the open source race. So everything is powered by open source, and wants to drive vision and drive the innovation race, they at some point need to start thinking about open, different from so many ways from the traditional companies and the private software. So when companies start to thinking about open source, they need to think about a different way of thinking, because open source is a community of communities. So what about cultural change, how to play new standards, the new infrastructure, new policies, how to manage challenge? In open source is completely different to any other things. Open source compliance, how to measure the return of investment here. It's just a mess. So some companies thought about what about building a strategic place where we can bring all these topics and teams together to manage open source in a more efficient way. Because that's the point. Try to manage open source and try to journey quicker and more efficient. And actually, that is what an open source or program office does. So it's somehow an open source accelerator for organization. And it's the linchpin between the organization and the open source ecosystem. And you can see I dropped you some links during the presentation that I will share with you this presentation. You can go ahead and take a deeper look, for instance, of the OSPO definition that has been there for ages. So you can go ahead and take a look there. So they said digital transformation is forcing more faster and a secure way and more effectively. So now point is, okay, but is this also think a buzzword, or is this actually a real thing? Because I don't know you, but now what I'm seeing from other people that is not in the TODO group or in the OSPO community is like people, they just saying OSPOs, but they don't know actually if that is working actually. So to explain this, I always like to share the most recent survey from what that the Linux Foundation conducted some months ago. This is from the contain this site that we call it. Here are some insights, but because I don't want to get more into detail, but you can go that will probably give you more insights and data about that. But some of the highlights I would like to know, share with you is, even though OSPO industry in this survey were more participants from different sectors, and for instance, the public sector and education, but also we saw people in the retail industry, people in the banking and finance sector. There's a lot of people there. So, it's not just now a thing in the Bay Area and in the tech industry, and that's all, but it's something worldwide that is affecting a lot of industries now. We also saw that the OSPOs are getting very or extremely critical for the success of engineering, and that fact raised from 54% to 63% in the last year. We are seeing more OSPOs being formed, so the professionalization of OSPOs are continuing. Like, it's true that there's a lot of companies though that are calling them differently, and this is some of the main issues of OSPOs, that even though a company doesn't have a structured OSPO, the role and the activities they are doing is actually an OSPO, right? But we are saying that this thing, this professionalization, this standardization is growing slowly, but it's growing. So that's great. There's an increase in funding of open source initiatives across the entire globe. And 77 of the respondents of this survey said that open source program had a positive impact. And from the ones that did say that they don't have an OSPO, 63% of those respondents said that they expected to initiate the process within a year. So that's right now the status of OSPOs right now. That is how big it's getting. And just for a quick close-up of the insight from this survey, now that this is an OpenChain meeting, I would like to highlight that most of these companies that has an OSPO or are thinking about how, most of the emerging OSPOs from these past years are in the really stage journey. They said that they start in the very first beginning of consuming open source, while some other populations started in the open source journey. And if you see that, then it's quite normal to find that the first two primary responsibilities of the open source program is fostering an open culture within an organization and maintaining open source license.
Anna?
Yeah, it's the brain. Hello? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but you were breaking up quite a bit. The screen was working perfectly, so we were getting the gist of it from reading what you had on screen. But yeah, we lost the screen share, and again, it was breaking up a bit. But hey, keep going. You're doing great.
Yes. Okay, what I'm gonna do is try to switch to a different internet. So let me switch a bit. Maybe it
Okay, go ahead.
It works. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna keep sharing my screen. Sorry about that. By the way, I'm not in my, I'm based in Madrid and now I'm on vacation. So I'm in a different place and maybe that's the main reason why this is happening. So sorry about that. Let me share again my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can.
Yep, looks good.
Awesome. Okay. Oh. No. Oh, okay. Okay, so yeah, we already explained this slide. Next point, what do we have now? Yeah, so this is just another thing that I wanted to share with you to see like how big is getting this OSPO ecosystem. So these are the firms or brands or organizations that share in a public way that they have an OSPO. We have this in the landscape.todogroup.org. That is one of the initiatives from the TODO group where we try to build an ecosystem of OSPOs. And we usually, when we find out that someone shares an OSPO, we try to add it to this landscape so people can go there and see the evolution of this OSPO movement at some point. And also, we also share tooling divided from different sections that can be also useful for people. But we will also like to see other ways of how to build this OSPO landscape. And maybe there might be different sections that we are missing out that can be included to give value to the to OSPO adopters. But this is not the point. The point is that these are the public OSPOs. But as I said, this is not the entire OSPO movement. We also have the working program OSPOs that might have or might not have official OSPOs, that might be only have like virtual OSPOs, or they might call them differently, not just OSPOs. And we also have the early stage OSPOs, those OSPOs that are not formed yet, or are just in the very beginning and they don't feel comfortable saying that they have an OSPO because they don't have anything yet. They're just starting their journey. And those OSPOs come from automotive, comes from banking, education, governments, tech, and retail. Fun fact that I recently find out about governments, and I live in Madrid, Spain, so in Europe. And I found out that the European Commission has built an OSPO. And if someone had told me this 3 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined a government having an OSPO. What? So yeah, I mean, I think this is the real thing. This is this year is coming strong in the OSPO wave, and it's important to keep in mind that. And I also would like to share some like big headlines, such as ports that also it's a new TODO member now recently launched the new open source initiatives. As I said, there are many different ways to call an OSPO, and companies are calling it differently. OSPO governments in Europe, that's the one that I said about European Commission having an OSPO, and Goldman Sachs, the banking and financial firm, also recently launched the open source program office. And also we have some of the insights from the survey that says who's gonna an option and the adoption by industry, that we can see the evolution from previous years if you check to previous surveys as well. Okay, so this was the context. Let's move now to what is the TODO group, and some of the things we did in the past and the evolution, the journey is taking now, and the future plans we have for the next years. All right. So the TODO group is a group of organizations that has an OSPO or an open source program office that which main goal is to cultivate growth and adoption of OSPO worldwide and be a place to share best practices, knowledge, and a place to ask for help for those organizations that are trying to build an OSPO. And also tooling, standards, guides, and so on. So the four main things we base this community is to try to foster a culture of collaboration within institutions, cultivate growth and adoption of OSPOs worldwide, not just in the States that initially they was created in the Bay Area. Most of these, it was a group of organizations in the Bay Area, but this is just the old OSPOs. We've been here like since 2012, so it's been a long time now. Great value for members and enhance open source software community relationships. So let me just, because this journey is getting quite long now. This was founded in 2012, as I said, by a bunch of companies, software companies in the Bay Area. It was limited to software companies. It was a niche community. And at that point, OSPO was not actually a real thing. We were most the pioneers of the movement and term in 2012. But that was the early stage TODO. In the TODO 2.2 version, that has changed. So OSPO is adopted by multiple sectors, public and private. We are no longer in just the software industry. Software industry is still big, but we are seeing OSPOs popping everywhere, literally. We are seeing that OSPO professionalism advances and grows. It's a worldwide community. You will see it in a bit, but the TODO group is formed by companies from different sectors and also from different regions. It's a worldwide movement. And we are trying to adapt to the new OSPO era with emerging new initiatives. So right now, we are more than 70 organizations that are working together to drive OSPOs to the next level. We were founded in 2012, and a lot of the members that are in the TODO group are really experienced members that has like years of experience running open source programs set up to drive open source across divisions. And we try to focus in 4 key areas when driving value to the OSPO movement. So the first is try to build open source relationship and networking, also strategy and leadership, community engagement, and open source legal and compliance. And try to help them towards the whole OSPO journey from the first baseline that OSPOs initially, many of the OSPOs start from the legal side. That is really interesting things when the pre-OSPO part is when organizations realize that they are using open source and they need to manage open source. And in this point, open source compliance and supply chain management starts to be very important for companies, and is the first thing they start to look at. And that's why OpenChain has a lot to deal with OSPOs at some point, because the baseline for every OSPO or open source initiative within a company is try to provide a safe environment. So a safe environment and a supportive environment are the 2 main ingredients for the OSPO to start growing, and trying to increase the ability to execute and start initially in safety, but then starts to provide education within the company, to try to educate developers and other teams across the company to the benefits of open source, why consuming open source, why contributing to open source. And then once we have this safe environment and the supportive environment, move to the engagement. Like, okay, most of the teams across my company and the developers already knows why open source is important, how to contribute to open source. Let's move to try to build valuable contributions and how to keep growing and growing. And at some point, once we have all this covered, move now to the leadership part, to try to build some leadership to the open source projects that matters most to the company. And of course, when advancing in this journey, try to keep in mind all the legal barriers, all the industry where you are, because there is more cultural gap. Like, it's not the same talking with a banking company that the safety baseline is going to be stronger than a software company that has been doing open source for ages, for sure. And of course, the team and organization. It's not the same talking with a small or a medium company that has maybe it's just one person doing OSPO, or they might not have an OSPO, just part of their time is being spent on OSPO, and that's perfectly normal because they have in a small company. It's not a big one, but normally in a big one there might be more funding or more space to create like a big team with a big OSPO. So that's also some of the framework we need to think about when advancing in the OSPO level that can reduce the ability, not reduce the ability to execute, but the time taken to move to one step to another might be longer and might take long time than the ones that maybe has already been engaging in open source, and that doesn't come from a traditional sector. But again, in all these industries, safety is the baseline and has a lot of importance. All right, so we already explained some of the contents. We already explained what is the TODO group and the evolution and how's now in these days. I also wanted to share briefly some of the initiatives we have been doing and the ones we are working right now so far. So when talking about TODO resources, we try to define try to map them in these 5 pillars. So networking, education, training, tools, and research. So the most popular ones that a lot of people might know are the TODO OSPO guys. This has been doing since the very beginning of the TODO story, that it's a collection of best practices from leading companies. So we have guides such as how to create an open source program, to using open source code, and or participating in open source communities. We have OSPO 101 training models that I know in some organizations, developers from those organizations took those courses. These are free, because some people actually ask like, hey, do I have to pay for it? Well, it's open source, 100% free. You have a repo with all the different models, and it's a basic OSPO, like, okay, I don't have any clue about OSPO. What do I do next? So a training model can help here. This year, we successfully held 2 OSPOCon. One was in the States and the other one was in Europe. And this was a set of events entirely for OSPO. It's the first event dedicated only for OSPO and open source initiatives within organizations. We are working for next year to have one, and fingers crossed, because we don't know all this because of the COVID thing, but we are trying to have also one for next year in Asia. So try to cover like these 3 regions where we have seen that the OSPOs are coming strong. So States, Europe, and Asia. We also have TODO local chapters. Right now we have the European chapter because it's what the community requested, and we haven't seen any other requests, but if people want to propose a new one, it's perfectly fine. So this was mainly to have meetings in a friendly Europe time zone, because normally some of these meetings are happening like super late in Europe. I'm based in Europe, and sometimes I have meeting like at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., which is fine, but is sometimes organizations are just stopping working and they don't want to join at that time. It's like super late for some of them. So we also not only meeting, but we also have like working groups. And one of the recent initiatives and projects they do last year was to bring up this case study of European smart city initiatives driven by open source software and why open source software matters to your enterprise. All these initiatives and projects and white papers, I'm adding the link here. So I will share with you this slide so you can go and check later and check that. We also this year launched the OSPology initiative, that it's a bunch of resources to try to bring all these OSPO news to the broader community. So we have the TODO newsletter, where we share like what did you miss from the OSPO news this month. We have TODO community meetings that is public for everyone. Shane was invited as a guest to talk about OpenChain and the work done on OpenChains last week from the December OSPology session. And everyone can go there, propose new topics, propose to become a speaker, and share value with the community. We also have like OSPO discussions, because even though we have a Slack channel where discussions happen, a lot of people cannot access Slack, or maybe the thread got lost with the conversation. So we have like an OSPO forum where people ask things. And we do also have all this happens in the OSPology GitHub repo that, as I said, it's free. Everyone can contribute and keep adding value to these new initiatives. Some close up of these things. So for instance, the OSPology monthly meetings we started in August, and the first one was related to how to start an OSPO. We usually, the format it takes is we invite some guests. So in that case was Bloomberg there, and they explain the OSPO journey in Bloomberg and how to start an OSPO. And then we move to a discussion section where the community can ask questions, propose new topics, and things like that. So that's the format it takes, and it lasts like 45 minutes. In September, we had something about mentoring and talent management within open source ecosystem. And the last one we had was about governance in the context of compliance on security, where Shane was there explaining also a bit about OpenChains and the mission of OpenChain right now. If everyone wants to contribute, we have the planning doc, and the scheduled topics for the upcoming months can be found also in the repo. And this comes from the OSPO discussions, and some OSPO discussion that has been happening lately, such as what other names are for OSPO. As I said, that's a big issue in the OSPO ecosystem right now. How to manage software bill of materials, measuring open source framework and adoption, and so on. So we've seen how the TODO group started and the early stage OSPO milestones. We also see the new TODO group, the 2.0 version. So now it comes the next one, the next version of TODO group, and it comes with some challenges, right? So given this situation, we would love to keep providing structure and guidance within the OSPO industry based on the experience OSPO professionals across sectors and stages, not only software, but also because this is getting bigger and we have more industries broadened, we need to collaborate with other communities to enhance this guidance. Because it's not just the TODO group, but for instance, if we want to keep providing value to the OSPO community, to the different within the different OSPO stages, we need to collaborate with those communities that has the expertise for specific topics. So, for instance, XPDX, OpenChain, Chaos for OSPO analytics, for instance, and more. And this brings us to the point of the OSPO accelerators idea. This is going to be just very briefly presentation. So what are the OSPO accelerators? So coming to the idea of trying to bring to build bridges with other communities. So these are initiatives or communities that can help your organization to accelerate your open source initiatives or OSPOs in different ways. And don't think this just as external communities, but it can be also in the own company, just in-house initiatives. So one common examples can be inner source. So if your company is doing inner source already, or has a team dedicated to inner source, some of those learnings, documentation, and resources can be at some point used and adapted to OSPO needs. So you don't need to start the journey from the very beginning. You can take some of the documentations used, you can align with that team and can take some of those documentations, adapt it, and use it to keep advancing in the OSPO journey in a more efficient way. But on the other hand, we also have external initiatives that can come from in the shape of foundations and the communities that are within those foundations, and can also come in the shape of private organizations, such as consultancy firms that are being focused in OSPOs, for instance, or how to deal with some of the specific activities within OSPOs or open source initiatives. And these OSPO accelerators can help us across the different OSPO stages that I briefly mentioned in last time. And some of these OSPO strategies can be in the pre-OSPO, that is more like awareness, so building testimonials, how to provide some of the research, how to build up proposals. Also in the safety stage, such as open source compliance, how to build legal standards, how to drive developer education within legal and risk issues, how to build an open source software inventory. Also, it can help, some of them can help in education. So it's more about evangelism and educating open source software use and ecosystem participation. Which projects should the developers be participating at in the software and the open source projects that matter most to the organization. Also, how to improve the engagement or how to improve the leadership. And I highlighted the first ones because I think, from just my opinion, but I think the OpenChain has a strong place in those first three stages. I mean, it's true that safety and compliance and all this topic, it goes from the very beginning of when starting out OSPO until the end. Like, it's not just, okay, I have everything I need to have, and then I just forget about the legal and risk issues. It's not that, but you need to keep in mind from the very beginning until the end. But it takes a very important place at the very beginning, because if this doesn't work, the OSPO is not going to be working. So that's quite important. And as I said, it's not just about one community. I think the Linux foundations, for instance, and other foundations. And I'm focusing on the Linux Foundation because it's where we are right now. But it has a lot of communities that can help this movement as maybe just for specific states, or maybe to help an industry to get into open source. For instance, finance is focused on driving open source in the finance and banking sector, because it's a very traditional way of doing things, and they have their own language. And having this community as an enabler to get into and having an OSPO or an open source initiative within the organization to accelerate the open source journey, it's a quite important and interesting thing, because it can, again, if you go faster than your competitors, that's the point, right? And they can also have, we can also find like guide kind of OSPO accelerators, such as the TODO group, that is not specialized into a specific area or into a specific industry, but it's more a bunch of organizations that has a lot of major OSPOs and has a lot of OSPO experience, and helps you be this point of contact across the entire OSPO journey. So that's why another OSPO TODO initiative we are doing right now is the OSPO Associate Program, to try to bring as many of communities that are helping at some point this OSPO movement together, and try to find new ways of collaborations, white papers, research, surveys, and more, and try to add more value to this new OSPO era. And that's all. Well, this was the Japan bi-weekly meeting, so that's why I added some Japanese in Japanese. But this is just a story about me. I was formerly at Bitergia, that was a software development analytics firm, and there I spent more than 3 years helping organizations in their open source and open source metrics journey. Right now, I'm the OSPO program manager at TODO Group. Last year, I finished my master's degree in data science, and I am also involved in all the open source software communities such as Chaos, TODO, Inner Source Commons, Developer Collective, or Developer Spain. And thank you so much. Maybe I would like also to hear your feedback. What do you think about this idea? So we can move now to some sort of group discussion.
All right. Anna, thank you so much. And I must apologize to you and everyone for being late. There was a bit of a family crisis and I had my eye off the clock for too long.
No worries.
Absolutely brilliant presentation. And you know, everything you said, I think, will come directly into use in OpenChain globally, but I think especially people in Asia will be super interested. For example, tomorrow we have a meeting of the OpenChain China work group. It's being hosted by CAICT, part of the Chinese Ministry of Trade. And I'll be taking this recording to the meeting and sharing with everyone there. I suppose one question I have is related to what we know in Japan. Many companies don't have OSPOs, and open source as a concept was often placed under the legal department or IP department. And converse to that, in some other companies, it was only placed under engineering. So there's a big gap in these companies between where they are today and having an OSPO that brings everything together. And I was just wondering if you had any tip to get started. And I know the obvious one is go to TODO Group. That's a solid starting tip. Go to the website. But you know, if you're in a company, you're looking at this recording and you're thinking, it would be great if we had an OSPO. How do I have the first conversation with someone who might enable me to connect with a different department?
So I would say that in the guides, there are certain topics that is like how to start an open source program and so on, that if I remember well, it serves like the different OSPO structures. And if it's not that one, I need to check that. But I think to-do guides are quite a useful thing. Also, in the first astrology session, it was also a good conversation we had about like the different auspos, so that can also help. And this is work in progress, what we are doing right now, but we are also trying to define, to give more shape to the different auspice structures, because even though it's clear for some companies, as you say, there are others that is like, where do we start, depending on the specific barriers we have right now as an industry or in our region. So we are trying to define some OSPO archetypes. So, but that still is work in progress, and we don't have launched that yet. But hopefully, once it can help these companies to see, okay, I have an OSPO, but this OSPO has more shape of this structure rather than the other one. So that's the point of building this OSPO archetypes.
That makes a lot of sense. Joshua, I noticed you're unmuted. Do you have something you'd like to jump in with?
Yeah, actually I do. And I'm sorry I have to stay kind of a little quiet. I had a little bit of a family issue myself while the presentation was going on.
Oh.
So, but a couple things. Anna, first off, lovely, thank you. Is there a chance to get a copy of the slides?
Yes, I'm planning to share them once we finish this meeting. I don't know, saying how we can do that. I will leave these slides like public, and maybe I can share with you, and you can share it with the community.
That would be great. I often put them up on SlideShare because that allows people to access around the world, including China. So I put them up there.
Okay.
Third, I don't know, whatever item. Something you raised a point about is that it's, and Shane, actually, you started it, was how do you start an OSPO? How do you do these things? How do you get moving? And there's get started guides. But part of the problem is personnel, people. And part of the problem as well, and it's something I ran up against, I'm sort of leading to a point, bear with me, is that it's hard for people to, if I want to start an OSPO, I need somebody who knows what they're talking about. It's hard to find them. I know somebody right now who's an open source strategist looking for work, and yet finding the job title open source strategist doesn't happen on Monster or Dice or Indeed or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So, and this may be a little out there for the to-do group, and so I apologize. But if there's a way to do a community board, a job board, an informational something or other, it could be incredibly useful for people. You know, you want to start an OSPO? Great. Here's 20 people that are looking to start one. Hire them.
So one of the things, one of the things we have is mostly happens in the Slack channel is the OSPO job channel. So there we try to gather all. Okay, this company is saying they're hiring for an open source specialist, but it's in the OSPO thing. And I agree with you that even though I'm seeing more organizations sharing the word OSPO somewhere, still it's some kind of blurry thing, and sometimes they don't even say an OSPO, but actually the job is about an OSPO. So we have that, and in the OSPO newsletter, we also have a section that are OSPO jobs for the month. So people can go and check, okay, so these organizations are looking for an OSPO specialist in the different OSPO section, whatever. So that is a starting point. I know it's not the best thing to do, but it's something to start with.
That's lovely. That's exactly what I was asking for. If you build a place for people, you know, look, people are resources, okay? And if you build a place where people can go and consistently find quality resources, it's going to be used, and that's going to be a huge community builder. So don't apologize. That's lovely.
I must admit, I had not yet subscribed to topic jobs on the to-do group Slack. That has now been fixed. That's really, really cool initiative. Now I know Yari seems to have a question too, but before Yari does his question, I just wanted to flag something interesting. The Korean work group is meeting shortly for a meeting similar to the Chinese one. For one reason or another, they're making it Squid Game theme. So if there are any survivors, I think they will very much appreciate having a chance to connect with you. And similar to Japan, the OSPO environment, the OSPO discussion is just getting started. One of the big challenges we had in Asia was that none of the timings around to-do group meetings in the past worked. And your work on the transformation of to-do group 2.0, having initiatives around the world is transformative for our community as a whole. So naturally, this talk will be going to that community. And one question that's bound to come up in China, Japan, and Korea is, will we have an OSPO event here similar to what happened in North America and what happened in Europe?
Yeah, I think I mentioned really briefly, I don't know if you were there or not, but during the presentation, I said that next year if everything was well, because COVID thing, and so we would love to have a OSPO Asia version, the same one as the Europe and the States one for during this year, to have another one Asia. But we need to see what happens. If are we gonna have it virtually, or are we gonna have it in person? So all this depends on, but yeah, these are the initial plan. The initial plan is to have one in Asia, because I know OSPOs, we've seen OSPOs are getting strong also in that region. So it's important to have a place of networking also there to that community for sure.
Brilliant. Gary, over to you. He's unmuted, but we can't hear anything. while he sorts
double unmuting. Now you can hear me. Perfect. So yeah, thanks, Anna. 2 questions, because you mentioned that you have these early stage OSPOs, etc., but I think that's not in the landscape yet. Are you planning to put that in a landscape?
Yeah, the thing is that we cannot actually add them until they say that they have an OSPO, because I know some organizations that they have an OSPO, but they are not ready yet to share it in a public way. So that depends on the organization, actually.
All right, yeah, because I know too, like some OSPOs which are, I guess, early stage, and they are not in the landscape. So yeah, maybe
if they have shared at some point in the website or in an article that they have an OSPO or an open source initiative, that we can use that. So
okay. Well, I know that there's an article about at least one company, actually it's a Finnish company called Iven.io. So they say that they are building an OSPO. It's now, I think the valuation is like 1 billion. So it's not tiny startup anymore. So maybe I can, find out that article and send it to you, and then you can see if that's something you should add to the landscape. And another question is that.
Yeah,
go ahead,
feel free also to open and pull request, and you can share it there, the article, and we can check it and review it. So that's also another way.
Yeah, perfect. And another question, because you mentioned that there are some maybe consulting companies who can help, other organizations to build OSPOs. Are those listed somewhere, or is it just upcoming thing?
Yeah, it's an upcoming thing, and I don't know. I mean, I know organizations and companies that some of their services are focused on OSPOs, but they are not just an OSPO consultancy firm at all, like only OSPO consultancy firm. There was one topic in the OSPO landscape that someone raised, that was, why not having this kind of consultancy firms also listed in the OSPO landscape that can help? I think it's a good idea, but the thing is that they are not so well structured to say these organizations only do OSPOs. consultancy. Like right now, we don't have that. Maybe in the future, we have that at some point.
Okay, yeah, all right, yeah, because I think, for example, at OpenChain, we have bunch of companies who help other organizations to be or get this ISO 5230 certificate. So and those are listed, so that's why I was wondering if there are some consulting companies who can help other organizations to build the OSPOs.
Just as a side note, I mean, OpenChain will be, I think, heavily guiding the global community towards OSPO engagement in 2022. So, I'm planning to work really closely with Anna on this, and we're going to have, I think, a good funnel of user companies, but also, for example, OpenChain has an enormous partner community at this stage, and to hopefully be able to provide a funnel for all of these entities to get involved, particularly user companies, though, to join TODO group and to benefit from all that it has. We're out of time, but there's one last thing, which is a huge thank you to Anna, because today is her day off. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. This is perfectly timed to get to some of our groups as a recording before the end of year Open Compliance Summit. So it's deeply appreciated that you're here today. And of course, we'll see you again at the Open Compliance Summit on the 16th.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you so much for having me and for giving me this opportunity to share my remarks about TODO group.
It was a really wonderful presentation, one of our best.
It was. No, that's fantastic. Thank you, Anna.
Well, everyone, if you're on vacation, have a wonderful day. If you're not on vacation, tough luck. And I'll see you all soon. Take care.
Okay. Have a nice day. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.